Okay, here we are back with Lee Takes Command, with the Grant Takes Command module that applies to this. Again, with the American Civil War campaign or operational series that Clash of Arms Games put out. I've got it mostly set up at this point. This covers a situation we've taken a look at before in other of my videos, in particular in Lee versus Grant, which is a larger area, I believe. It's kind of hard for me to really tell for sure, but I believe that shoots me up further. This is, past the Santa Ana fighting, I think. Yeah, they say after North Anna. I also have something that I didn't realize was this, North Anna. Santa Ana, God. My brain is not working. If you recall from Imperial Struggle, at the end of that I was having trouble. Today has been a really, really bad day for the COVID vlog. For whatever reason. I was supposed to go off, maybe go swimming a little bit or something at the river, but I just couldn't make it out of the house. I was too terrified of, having a stroke or something. Anyway, a while ago, I made some mistaken statements long ago. Strike Them a Blow, one of the last of the CWB, or maybe the last of the CWB series, actually covers that battling over the North Anna. Anyway, what this is going to cover is an operational situation where the Confederates are falling back to defend Richmond, and Grant is going to keep trying to outflank them. It seems like almost a perfect situation for this game design. And so we've got Butler's Army of the James down here, and we have the Army of the Potomac, most of which is kind of off map, but it'll be trickling in on the first couple turns, and you got to make. There's a photocopiable thing, but that's the turn record track for this one. And then you have the Army of North Virginia trying to screen there. And this is the Richmond Protection Corps or something like that, which can get integrated into the Army of North Virginia, but only if you manage to lose Beauregard. This one actually uses the Jeff Davis counter, which I have no rules for from Lee Takes Command. It's kind of weird. It's like, maybe this was intended for this? I don't know. Because like most of this series, it comes with a bunch of optional counters and rules that I don't think are actually covered in the game itself. I know I wouldn't have done, so we got a no Stuart raid one, but we don't have any reason that Jeff Davis would be in here in the original game. And, there are additional units and stuff, and there's no rules for them. Presumably they were released in this House organ. Okay, so what do we have here? Let's keep this around because specific rules apply from there into here as well. So the Confederate chain of command, Lee is in charge of the Army of Northern Virginia, the first 3 corps. We have some divisional commanders, and the Confederates in this expansion, their replacement counters are all 1-1s, and the Union ones are all 0-0s, whatever. But we also have the Richburg and Petersburg Defense Command, which is a single corps led by Beauregard. If he's a casualty, all the infantry units have to trace to Beauregard, and Beauregard just has to trace to President Davis, who is his kind of army commander for this. You can't transfer between these two forces, and they cannot even stack in the same area. However, that can be removed if Beauregard gets replaced. The Confederates have 3 independent independent divisions. Some up here. Pickett is one of them. Hoke. I don't know where the other one is. And they don't start with a corps. They can move and defend normally, but if they're going to force march or do an attack order, you have to assign them to a corps officer or Beauregard. And then that's written down, and for the rest of the game, it remains assigned to that corps, which is kind of an interesting situation. It doesn't say what happens to them in terms of like multiple units from multiple commands or whatever. So like, I don't know if you can have them embedded in a wing if you haven't assigned them. There are no rules as to when you can make that assignment, I assume at any time. For the Union, you have General Grant, but he's got two armies under his command, the Army of the Potomac, which is commanded by Meade, and the Army of the James under Butler. Meade is commander of all Army of Potomac formations. He has no replacement. Yeah, right. To be fully in command, all infantry have to trace command to their corps, and then that corps officer to Meade. However, you may instead trace to Grant. And likewise with the 9th Corps, it has some special restrictions though. The units may move and defend normally as per standard rules, but in order for them to force march or conduct attacks, Grant has to be adjacent. I'm sorry, this is the 9th Corps of the Army of the Potomac. Grant has to be adjacent. I thought it was the Army of the James for some reason. Grant has to be adjacent to Burnside, who in turn must be adjacent to his own units, or in. And if Burnside becomes a casualty, the 9th Corps becomes normal. Again, there's always, like, this system hates Burnside. Yes, he was problematic. I don't know if he was that problematic overall. He's kind of a neat leader in some ways. Okay, what about Butler? He's the Army of the James commander, 2 corps. To be in command, the infantry have to trace command to their corps officer and then to Butler. And instead, they could trace to Grant. The corps officer could trace to Grant. Good luck getting Grant down there and linking up, but we'll see. During the communications phase, yeah, this also seems unlikely. Units from the Army of the Potomac and the James can be transferred back and forth to each other. You mark this down on here. This can be done at any range, but you have to be able to trace command to the new officer to be able to do things right. And if you transfer it back to the other army, it has to go back under the corps it came from. They operate normally when they're transferred, but to force march, in order to force march or do an attack in the same turn, Grant must have started the communications phase in or adjacent to the transferred units. You can't completely eliminate a corps by transferring units away. Both sides have home areas. The Union can switch them. The Confederacy can't. The Confederacy's home area is Richmond. If Lee cannot trace a line of communication to Richmond, the Union gets a victory point. The Union has one where the current Union supply base marker is. Well, I've got a dummy marker for this because I don't want to, wear out the real marker. Plus, this one was the one that I found first. But I don't know where that Union supply marker goes, so we're going to keep waiting. I bet it's in this roll. Weather. Okay, we've got the normal weathers here. Heat has been added, which wasn't in Lee Takes Command, but there's no die roll for it. It's all pre-programmed, which I kind of don't like, but whatever. No naval operations. All the special terrain from Lee Takes Command is in play, except for 5.13 and 5.32, which are modified. Now, there was a lot of terrain in this one, if I recall correctly. which was kind of painful. And I'm going to refer you to the Lee Takes Command intro to look at that. I'm not really familiar with it anymore, but I have been dragging my feet too much today to get this started, and I want to at least, I can look things up while I play, and you can see what they do. But we've got gully swamps, which can't be force marched anymore, and this is a rule that should have applied to Lee Takes Command, but it wasn't in there. And then there are destroyed bridges. Area 15 and 26 is destroyed. That's this one. Let me find a bridge destroyed marker. Okay, that one is destroyed to begin the game. And remember, there was some, temporary bridging and bridge destruction rules in this game of the system. The James River, on the other hand, down here, is a significant obstacle. Only Union forces can cross the James in absence of the bridges that are in Richmond. There are no crossings or anything like that allowed. Normally you would be doing this with the boats. To do so, the Union does the following. Up to 2 Union combat units, plus any number of leaders, can cross from any one area containing an anchor to any one area containing an anchor during the Union player movement phase. And I don't know if there's a lot of anchors here. So there's a significant capability to shift over to the other side of the river. The units must have started the turn in the area they're departing from, and they don't get to move again. They can't move into an enemy occupied area. The Union can trace command and supply across the James River. Command and supply may only be traced from an area containing a port anchor symbol to another area containing a port anchor symbol. You can't fight across the James, except at Richmond, if you're crossing the bridges, and then it's normal combat across the bridges. The Union home base. The Union home base starts out in any area along the northern mappage, including Area 11. Overland up here. Okay. It can be shifted on any AM turn. I think the first turn is an AM turn. I did not write that down. Didn't know it was important. Yeah, the first turn's an AM turn, so every odd turn. To any area containing an anchor port symbol during the Union communications phase following the occupation of the area by an effective Union cavalry or infantry. This includes reinforcements from the Army of James disembarking at Area 86 on turn 9. White House, which should be way... where? I don't know where it should be. Where the fuck's White House? I thought it was over here. Over here. Oh boy. Can never find anything in this damn game. It's over here, yes. Okay. Wow. All right. Any sole occupation of the Union home base by an effective Confederate combat unit prevents all Union units from moving closer to Richmond or to the James River for the following turn. The Confederate player also gets 5 victory points each turn he solely occupies the Union home base, so you don't want to give it up. There are no Confederate command restrictions. I don't remember what there were. There was something in the other one. Special units, don't deal with them. Okay, supply rules. All regular and garrison infantry units, plus artillery units, must be in supply, or they could take a limit. I don't remember if there were any here. Again, I wanted to kind of combine and understand stuff. Okay, so this is the one that had all these stupid supply trains. When to determine supply status? Supply status is determined each AM turn, every other turn during communications, and lasts until the next. You have to check supply every 2 turns. The Union player supply source is the area containing the supply base counter. All supplies come from that area. The Confederate supply source is Richmond. All supplies come from there. Units in supply source area are automatically in supply. Adjacent are automatically in supply unless the enemy completely occupies it. Otherwise, you have to trace supply along a path of railway or roads free of enemy units. Distance doesn't matter. Dummies, ineffective enemy units, and leaders cannot block supply. You can trace through mutually occupied areas as long as at least one friendly unit in the area is either infantry, artillery, or cavalry. Militia and dummies and leaders can't protect you. If you're out of supply, you can't force march, you can't recover stragglers. Your combat strength total is halved. That's on defense too. Infantry and artillery found to be out of supply have to roll on the straggler table. Well, I'm a little worried here because I don't know how the Union's in supply back here on the James River, and they should be. Does this say something about the Army of the Potomac? It does not. Very interesting. Screwed, I believe. And unbelievably so. Great. Yeah, so if that is to be taken as written, the Army of the James is just going to disintegrate if you don't run it out of where it was, which was a major supply depot for them, and they had shipping there. They had nothing to stop them, so I may make up some new rules. The Confederate has 1 infantry division, Stevens, and an artillery unit that are the Richmond garrison. Really? That's interesting. I got the artillery. Oh, there's Stevens. Where's the artillery unit? Jones's artillery. I know I set them up. But they're not called Jones. I think it's this. This is considered Jones's artillery. I don't know. They don't have to operate only in the Richmond fortified zone. They can go anywhere. Okay, there's entrenchments in this game. There were entrenchments in the last one. But you must use them here if they were optional in the last one. And they're the standard rules for entrenchment. Cav and artillery, line position deployment. This is all the same. Okay, combat round restrictions. There's only 1 round of combat in each turn, in each battle per turn in this game. And that's because of the shorter turns. And if you remember, that kind of skews the whole concept of the game. These half-day turns don't work in comparison to their, the system just kind of breaks when you do that. As far as I'm concerned, it changes, it destroys my believing this system, because you're allowed to completely shift your wings around at noon, essentially, if you do that. You must use the troop density rules for this one. Otherwise, the Union could just walk through Lee, and that's a problem. What are the victory points for? Losses, the Union home base being occupied, and ineffective. If no effective units are south of the James River by game end, that's worth 10 victory points. Now, that's a problem because, remember, there's nothing in supply here. So, those are just going to die. I really can't accept that. I'm sorry. I think something's very wrong. The following victory points, the Union gets victory points for destroying, for Lee not being able to trace line of communication. Nothing equivalent for the Union that I see. For sole possession of Arrow Field, Area 136. Well, what the fuck is that? Is that anything? I mean, I'm assuming it's something interesting. It's in the hundreds, so it's got to be down here. Here it is. Okay. So it's the rail juncture for the James. Yeah. You know, I may be able to trace supply from here down the roads to a port symbol and then over to the Army of the James. That may allow supply to be traced. I don't think it adequately represents how the James was supplied, but I'll have to look at how they do it. Because they had something about tracing across the James here. Command and supply can be traced across the River James from a port to another port. Okay, so I think it's going to be harder to prevent. Like, the Confederates don't have the troops to prevent you from being able to trace to one of those ports and then to the Army of the James. But the Army of the James was not reliant on the Army of the Potomac supply source. I'm sorry. It seems like an annoyance to do it that way. Richmond is worth 20 victory points. If you have effective infantry next to Richmond, you get 1 at the end of each turn. 20 if you have sole possession of Richmond. Yeah, good luck with that without winning the game. And then some losses there. Whoever has the most victory points wins the game. Tied scores a draw, but Grant retains command and will grind down the Confederacy within a year. Optional rules may be used except for 12.1. If using 12.3, the engineering brigade must stack with Grant. Well, we're going to use those. That one obviously not, but we got these corridor bridges that we can build. Same rules as last time. The pontoon bridges can be built by the Union engineer, and we have to put the Union engineer with Grant, and I've got him kicking around somewhere. I got to figure out where that supply source is going to be. I got to figure out where Grant is. There, we'll put him over there. All right. That's all she wrote for whatever intro I'm doing here. And I hope I'll get to playing. I am sorry for not giving you a full intro, but I got to tell you the truth. With all the terrain effects in the Lee Takes Command map, yes, I would like to be reviewing them on video, and I would have liked to have reviewed them before I started this, but I'm trying to get myself engaged enough to play something. So the basic goal in this one is for Grant to get around Lee and beyond the river lines. In order to do that, I want my supply source to be as far away from Lee as possible, because I don't want to expose it. So I don't want it up here, even though my reinforcements are coming in on this side. I want it back here because it's essentially an unlimited trace in terms of distance, but you know, I want to be able to kind of shift and force Lee along this line, possibly, but I'm hoping to get by him. And at the point that I get by, I can just fling it down there. I don't have to actually march it a la McClellan, as far as I can tell. I hope. I've been misplaying reinforcements in this game by placing them on the map. Actually, they're off map. They have to spend their first movement point coming onto the map, which means, you know, since this is really a one movement per area game for the most part, unless you're going to force march, I've been getting a little jump. This is the first time I noticed it because, or at least the first time in a while, because the Union sets up in places where reinforcements are coming in on turn 1, and I'm kind of like, well, why isn't that just set up? So I went and looked it up. I may have known better earlier on. The swamps, I believe I can't force march, can I? gotta read through everything here. I might be able to. Looks like I can. Looks like there's no restriction to forced marching. And given that I want to get the jump and move away, and the Confederates are kind of sort of dug in there. I mean, these units back here are not. I've already gotten kind of a jump on Lee in terms of movement. I probably want to be moving as quickly as possible. If you remember, if you watched my Lee versus Grant stuff, that's what the game is entirely about. The Union comes in, they try to engage across a river or something like that. They fight at kind of iffy odds, and then the Confederates kind of entrench into position, and the Union can't deal with that, so they keep skimming away further and further towards the coast. And we pulled the Union Army down as fast as they could, pretty much. Force march markers on these guys. And they have a penalty. And some of them are getting kind of tired. So this is one of the problems with forced marching, is that, like, you gotta rest a turn after you force march. So getting that 2 hex thing might not be a good thing. Now, it's not a guarantee that you gotta rest a turn, because you might not succeed. You might not take damage in your forced march. And we have a couple of corps, or a couple of divisions that did not. So some of 2nd Corps didn't take straggle losses. I might keep pushing 2nd Corps while I move other things around. We also threw one of Butler's cav out here. The reason for this, at the beginning of any AM turn, I can shift this down to here now, which might be an appealing concept. I also have the possibility of running to Whitehorse and making that White House, and making that my new supply center instead. No matter what, though, I've got to keep a chain, for whatever reason, between White House or between one of these and the Union supply line, as well as making sure that the main Potomac Army is in supply. And I've got additional forces coming in on the Potomac up to turn 9, which is actually down here. Final turn, they have the same problem that they have in Lee versus Grant, which is I gotta block the Union Army, but I can't let them slip around from where they just came. So it's kind of this tricky situation. Over here, I think we just leave Beauregard guarding things down there. But for the Army of Northern Virginia, I gotta worry about trying to maintain this river line as long as I can, and see what I can do to force the Union not to fight it. Now, some of my bonuses here are I can use dummy counters, and the Union's got some too. One of the things about this, unlike in the the Battle Above the Clouds or whatever, there are not enough dummy counters in the expansion to handle this, so you got to dig into the dummy counters from the Lee Takes Command scenario, which is a little weird because they kind of look essentially the same, as they should, and the only thing I have going for me is somebody else clipped Lee Takes Command, and they left kind of sharp corners on. They didn't do as extreme a clipping job as I do, so there's a little bit of differentiation there. But otherwise, I'm gonna get my counters mixed in. It's one of the issues with these patches. If it weren't for the fact, I think the only counters that are shared between them are the dummy counters, and like you could break the two expansion scenarios into their own little, into the boxes they belong in, except that the dummy counters, the leader replacements, and the Grant counter are shared between the two expansions. So, well, there you have that logistical problem. We'll do significantly less force marching on the flip these for no apparent reason. Let's move Stevens up here. What the hell? But yeah, it's it's a matter of, I think the Union's going to have to either slow down their forced marching or they're going to be pretty weak and the Confederates will be able to hammer them. I wasn't able to sort of trick the Confederates or whatever into charging too hard. The problem is, the Confederates are going to be able to force a river crossing battle if I'm not careful. And if the Union lets the Confederates just run down this way, that could cause problems for the unit that's heading over here. So, gotta be careful. Lee might just turn on me. And I'm not going to pay attention to the weather ahead of time. Is a rain turn? Because it is essentially the same as the random event weather if I do it that way. Oops. The second turn, you can see the Union spread out more. Some of that's dummy, some of it's real. Burnside is on the board with rain. I'm not force marching anywhere. Chances of a problem are too high, and I expect the weather is going to get better because it's that kind of time of year. All right, on to the Rebs. And I'm busily destroying bridges along the way. I remember there was something where the bridges got cut by the river during rain turns. I don't know if that's the case, but I want to wreck these things. I don't want the Union making any crossings anywhere that I can. I'm going to make this as hard as possible on them. I don't know how hard that is, because here's the thing. Just because there isn't a bridge there doesn't mean there can't be a bridge there. There's the corridor bridges, and then the engineers have the pontoon bridges, and the pontoon bridges really just let you breach the river. So I'm not terribly convinced that this breaking of the bridges is all that big a deal. But it can slow the Union down if they have to use corduroy. If they are using the pontoon bridge, if they can get the engineer into place, then they can kind of storm through. So it's not like I can just give up the cordoning. I think I'm going to halt for there tonight, just because I'm having a little trouble getting into the swing of playing, but it's okay. The situation with the Confederates apparently abandoning the North Anna crossings here, while the Union is still kind of present there, or whatever. The key point is that the Union is capable of moving across it if I get close enough. Well, or if I'm close enough. I could throw a pontoon bridge. Unfortunately, I have my engineers over here, and just storm across, and the Confederates can probably react and shift over at this point in the game. But if things become spread out enough that a big force of Union can cross over there, what does that mean? These bridges aren't blown, so it's not going to be any hindrance. They're going to be able to just march, not force march, but just march across, probably. Confederates might be able to fling something light in the way, cav or something like that. It's not going to do much. And then it looks like, hey, the route to Richmond is open. But is it really? See, this is something that happened in Lee versus Grant, too. If the Union gets around on the wrong side, it's hard for them to maintain their supplies. If they get around on this side, it's great. They can move their supplies down. But if they get around on this side, they've got to protect the rail line or the road or whatever, tracing all the way back to here. They're not allowed to move that over there. And this is actually worse than in Lee versus Grant. But it's actually kind of problematic to make that on-land track, whereas it's much, much easier for me to maintain the supply of the Union Army by pushing along, with the coastal support. So if I was set up for it, I might try it, but given that the engineer is here, I think I'm going to continue with my strategy. And trying to recover stragglers, trying not to hurt myself too much. I'm not making a lot of great headway against the rebels here in terms of pushing towards White House or whatever. And I gotta be careful because I don't want to end up screwing this up. I don't want to end up being cordoned all the way across this river. Of course, if it's all the way across, I can probably find a weak spot to smash through. But the weak spot I want to smash through, or where I want to be pushing, is over here. And I'm having trouble, I move the same speed the Confederates do. I take stragglers maybe at a higher rate because my units might be bigger. I had illicitly blown at least one bridge. But anyway, the rebels have moved further afield. We got a couple of... I hope these are actually all bridges. They're not. They're crossing points. I can't screw with crossing points, can I? So that's a crossing point. That's nothing. No, that's a bridge. That's a bridge. That's a bridge. I guess. I don't know. Yeah, these are ferries. This is a ferry. This I can't tell. I think it's a ferry. Yeah, it says fort on it, so it probably is. This is a bridge. This is a ford. Yeah, I'm destroying things that can't be destroyed. And I mean, it doesn't really help that they're bridges versus fords. Fords are essentially the same. So there are... I'm not able to wreck the infrastructure going back. I assigned Pickett and Breckenridge over to Second Corps. Second Corps is a little shallow, and they could definitely be used there. That allowed me to force march with them because they're close in. Unfortunately, Hoke is back here along with a Second Corps unit, which are not going to be able to force march, so they're going to be straggling their way up. And that's going to be it for a little bit. This is a long one, so probably going to be multiple videos, but yeah, we're making our way through. A lot of Union movement, not trying to trick them too much with the cav over here. I force marched Burnside. The only one I did, it was near Grant. Force marching is such a bum deal. I kind of can't cross the river after you can't cross the river when you force march. The turn after, you're probably needing to relax for a couple turns to make a safe crossing if you're facing any kind of competition. I figured out how many Union dummies I have and got them all on the map to help confuse the matter. Confederates don't really know what's going on. Just, the heavy weight of the Union is over here. Now the goal is kind of maybe entrench and figure out how to defend the eastern portion. Let's try to build their cordon. I've been having trouble getting up here to play. Last couple of days haven't been good health-wise, so... and it's my own doing, but one thing I did learn, though, is that alcohol... I had suspected this from the fact that the nights I went out dancing, I didn't pay the price that I've been paying for when I do any physical activity. Alcohol seems to actually help combat this shit. Maybe not the actual virus, but the after effects. Which makes sense. It has impacts on the clotting elements that reduce clotting. Again, I could go to a doctor and get a drug for it, and it would cost me thousands of dollars because that's what my deductible is. Or I can spend a couple $100 on a few bottles of vodka. And another Union sliding towards the east. Still haven't reacted yet with the Confederates. One thing I was thinking about, oh wow, that's a pretty sky. I don't know if you can see it, probably not. Just understated, but pretty. The the major decision in the campaign, as far as I'm concerned, in this part, of the overall campaign, is what to do with the Army of the James. And that decision is made for you in this scenario. These troops are Army of the James troops. They come in here. You don't have the option to try to punch your way out here. Butler thought he could. His two generals thought he couldn't. And commanding officers had to rely on the goodwill of their underlings. And they kind of do anyway, so he acceded to their wishes and decided to join up with the Potomac and work towards Richmond that way. That creates a very different type of scenario, and I feel like you could probably tinker with this and make a what if and try to break out with him there. He's not facing a whole hell of a lot, but it would be a meat grinder. But it's going to be a meat grinder somewhere on this campaign, no matter what. These games of this series, I've played that entrenchments are limited by countermeasures, and I think I saw that somewhere in one of the rule sets. But I've been combing through this particular optional rule on entrenchments. Remember, each of the series games has its own specific rules. Many of the optionals are built into those specific rules, and then they kind of some of them got folded into the standard rules, but here, entrenchment seems to have been kept on a person-era basis, even though they largely have the same rules. Now, maybe I misread something about them being limited. But anyway, something was, and I don't remember what. I can't think of anything other than entrenchments that are. Maybe the bridging. There's certainly limits to the number of bridges you're allowed, but that makes sense. The entrenchments just don't, and I may have conflated the two. But yeah, the Confederates are placing some of their, or performing some of their movement, doing some entrenching, and I'm out of entrenchments. And in other games, we had this situation of, oh shit, I got to give up an entrenchment here to get this. Well, the only one I can give up is this, and that would get me one more entrenched position. But remember, that won't be breastworks all along the river or anything like that. And quite simply, the armies were completely capable of just digging in as a whole at this point. So I feel like the entrenchments here, especially since the Union's eating a couple of them up for the Army of the James, and the Confederate response to that is, I feel like they have to be unlimited. And since there's no restriction on that, I'm going to allow that. Because otherwise I'd be giving this up and moving the garrison forward. And you couldn't have double lines of entrenchment or anything like that. And again, the armies were capable of that at this point. The problem with the Confederate plan, as I end the turn, is I just don't have the troops to defend this whole line. I don't have the troops to defend this whole line either. But maybe with enough time I would be able to spread out and equalize and get everything entrenched. But one of the problems is no matter what, I can't stop the Union troops from showing up here. There's nothing I can do about that. I could move forces there and entrench them and make it harder for the Union to leave there once they're there. But they won't be facing that river crossing penalty or anything. They're not counting as disembarking from there. They're just reinforcements. On the other hand, I might be able to defend something kind of along here. Not well. It's just the whole problem. Nothing can be done terribly well. I just don't have that many troops. And my worry with the Union was no matter how far I go, yeah, the Confederates can move along with me. But as I'm spreading across, it's becoming obvious that, yeah, they're getting spread pretty thin. And all my dummies make it so that they can't be sure where I might launch my attack. So remember, there's the pontoon bridge. Now, we're probably going to see that attack this turn, but anyway. A slow engineering unit is too hard to get into place to launch the kind of attack that I want. Everywhere where I had a crossing available and a good attack set up was entrenched, except for here. So I launched here, and I could have actually done an engineering, built the pontoon bridge and just launched into here. But I'm counting that this is not that strongly defended, but it doesn't have to be that strong because it's got the river line. So we'll see how that battle turns. So let's play out the battle, I guess, because I like to do that for some reason. A bunch of dummies, but we got Hoke. Or maybe he's hokey. And he's standing. He wants to hold the line if he can. We are facing a real Union Corps, which is just advancing. This is a hard call because assault is more likely to drive these things out of there, which is what we need to do in order to get the foothold. If we don't get that, we have to withdraw back. Okay. And remember, there's only one round of combat, so unlike, this is what's so screwed up. So in some of the games, you have a whole day to cross the river. In this particular game, the Lee takes command map, essentially, you have half a day to ever make an attack succeed. So crossing a river is harder in this one just because of the scale, which didn't have anything corresponding in the special rules. You have to tinker with a game too much once you start tinkering with scale in general. So anyway, we have 6th Corps here, which is not in bad shape. I'm down 1 for 6th Corps. So that's 1723. And then my artillery should be times 2 on an advance, 23, 35. So I'm at 17 and a half. That's quite a bit. And the rebels' Hoke is fine. So he's at 7. We're on a 4. The chart is set up differently. They made it bigger in this one, but it's hard for me to cope with the difference. So the combat intensity is 2 to 1. 2. That's going to be 1 loss on the Union to begin with. But then we come to the casualties. We're looking at, geez, what kind of terrain is that? I don't know. I'm going to say that's normal terrain. It's hard to tell because there's shit blurring in here. Again, a misguided, in my opinion, attempt towards a certain kind of beauty has made these maps very difficult to understand. So, yeah, there's some green in here too, but I would definitely call this clear. So, I'm guessing this little ridge up here is not really part of this space. Okay, so that was combat intensity, and we do not get a shift against this because it's not defensible. Now firepower, we're looking at 17 and a half, which is just going to put us here. We're not going to round it up to 7 with a leadership advantage. So we're looking at the 4 and 15 charts. Yeah. Okay. And nobody did shit. The Union failed to damage the Confederates sufficiently to send them from the area, so we have to fall back. Of course, that also required a straggler check, and lost artillery on that. It's not good to attack across a river. I knew this, but I feel like I'm not able to do anything. And if it weren't for the fact that I had troops coming in here that are kind of securing the fact that I'll be able to cross here, Grant would be permanently kept away by the river cordon, no matter how thin he stretches Lee's forces, because, well, the size of the map, really. Yes, I could cross over here and start, making things even harder, but I got no way to launch an attack over here with my supply source here, and I can't move it around on the north edge, which is different from, this is not meant to be the Lee versus Grant scenario where you have this whole option. This is meant to represent this curve through and nothing else. Limiting it so much, you really take away what this system is about in this scenario. Now, this is not as painful as the last scenario from what I can see in the in this Grant takes command little couple expansions. This one will have real battles, and there's going to be a real issue going on. It's not that cat and mouse game of maneuver that you'd want for this whole campaign. Even this part of it, the only reason, that this part isn't a cat and mouse game is because that major decision is made. There's no real option to move to your right. You can make that real early. You put your headquarters over here and you just storm that way. But as soon as you make that move, the Confederate plan changes completely. And here's the thing, you still get these guys here, which is not really where you want them in that case. Anyway, on to the rebel turn. Now the rebels are going to clear this cav out if they can. They did a probe, and they did one last turn too, didn't find it, and decided to just back out because it was more important to cover things. At this point, I feel like I have the river properly cordoned. Yes, I'm not entrenched everywhere along it, but as we saw here, that wasn't necessary. And now the problem, of course, is once this happens, I gotta start falling back real soon. I gotta cover the river line. So, I may move this guy instead. And keep an actual entrenchment there. Because the thing is, I want him to blow bridges and do stuff like that to make life a little bit more difficult on the Union. One nice thing is there are no crossing areas anywhere back here. So if I can start blowing bridges back here, yeah, that's a slow and painful process, but I can really keep the Union from crossing the Chickahominy here. Interesting. Okay. The withdrawal is too high, so I'm going to do, I guess, the advance versus stand. I'm not sure. We're in clear terrain. I guess again. It's hard to tell. Is this defensible? Again, I don't know. So that's kind of an impact there. So we've got 2-to-1. At 2, we don't want that. So we're gonna, we would count on a stand. So we're gonna do a, as the attacker, we're gonna do a diversionary attack. Although that may not be great either. It's hard to tell. That keeps us from taking an automatic loss. And now, since we're fighting cav, we're halved. So we're on diversion area at 1-to-2, and he's on stand at 1-to-2. There's not much chance of anybody doing anything. Nothing happens. The Confederates get their I fought marker, which doesn't do much either because the Union can leave, and because they've got cav and force an interception attempt, which puts the Confederates again on the offensive. So there's very little value to fighting with Cav at these low numbers. All right, that's the turn, and that's it for this morning. I gotta get to work. I push into the seventh turn. I've been mulling around the ideas of, and yeah, I'm not playing anywhere near as much as I should, of the reinforcement coming in here. It's just a standard reinforcement. Now, Lee takes command, I don't believe had any, I looked for any rules for naval movement. It had rules for the gunboats coming up and messing with Richmond, but you couldn't get the units out of the James River. Did I recall? Yeah, I don't see anything like that. Mississippi fortresses did have rules for naval movement. And if you were doing something like a landing here, you would have to do a river crossing type landing. Of course, you had 2 rounds of combat, so you could possibly smash what was going on there. In this game, though, instead these just show up as reinforcements as if they just walked there perfectly fine. So the Confederates can't hold the river line the way that you would kind of think they could, to tell you the truth. Inside of the turn, not a lot of movement here. A little bit of forced marching coming around the corner, but that's actually Burnside for what it's worth. But for the most part, trying to recover our position, our strength. Obviously, crossing the river against opposed forces doesn't work very well. With the Confederate cav here, I don't have an easy way to punch my own cav through to scout out what the Confederates are doing, so I'm pretty much waiting for the Army of the James forces to make their way up. And because I have the troop density table rules, I moved some infantry into here. I've got as much protection as I can cordoning the river, and I'm launching attack on these guys. They're going to withdraw. The cav is not going to be able to chase them. Remember, the odds weren't good, and we kind of got away lucky. So, both have declared combat. But yeah, now we have a cordon. It's still not going to work. The Union's going to be able to fight their way out of here, even entrenched, etc. But that may give me some time to blow a few bridges over here and make life a little bit more difficult on the Union when it comes to crossing the Chickahominy. So, weird shifting going on with the Union. Some thought of trying to send cav around for a raid on Richmond. But other than that, not much is developing. He has recovered his army entirely and entrenched it all along the river line. We've got our garrison here to start blowing bridges. I think we're in pretty good shape to start. You know, the battle's going to start at this point. The big issue is bringing, what is it, Smith, not Gilmore. I may start funneling Gilmore up because it's obvious. Hey, you know what is obvious? No. The Union can trace supply. Yeah, right. To here and then over. I mean, yes, the Confederates could have worked a little harder to cordon things off, but then they'd have a weaker line. As it is, they would already have to give this up if it was demanded, hey, do I have a supply route? Yeah, you do. You know, I might not have to specify where it is. I'm not sure about that. But it's definitely the case that, you know, there's just not enough Confederate forces to cordon the entire river line. Now, had I blown this bridge, is that a bridge? Looks like a bridge. It's hard to tell. No, it's a ford. But there's not a symbol for Ford there, so it's like, is it really? I don't know. There's a road going through it. So yeah, there was actually no way I could do it except by blowing these bridges. Well, these three, then I would have this covered. But that would have been a totally different plan. That would have involved the garrison going up there and doing that, or leaving somebody behind to blow those bridges. It didn't seem like that was going to be necessary. And as soon as this is contested, I can draw supply through it. So that won't actually be a long-term situation. I mean, lands Smith here, but they're not launching an attack. They don't feel he's strong enough to take on a core, and that's probably what he's facing. He's got a core, but it's not a very good one. You can see Gilmore is perhaps moving some troops to shift over. There's a danger to this. Beauregard may attack. Or there's another danger. These are not entrenched, and so I may have to take some time to move those out safely so Beauregard can't just attack. This is defensible terrain, entrenched. It's probably not a great idea to hit that, even if that's half the core. Not much else appearing to happen. A little bit going out here. What's up with that? Choose to do almost nothing, just breaking a bridge. That pushes us to turn 10. I'm going to load this one up. We're not halfway through, supposedly, but we're an hour into this, and the game could go pretty quickly. Once the line breaks, things are going to get really interesting. And I feel like this is actually a really good stopping point, and that's also where I'm going to stop for the evening. So it's pretty cool overall. In a lot of ways, it's a point to